we're going to have a look at the stanzas of Isabella or the Pot of Basil. So I recommend reading the stanzas aloud to yourself. For the sake of being as quick as I can with the story, I'm not going to do that here. I might just kind of touch on a few lines that I think are quite significant. So you can structure this just listening to me and making notes as you go, or you can structure it with pauses in between the stanzas where you read the lines out yourself. Or at another time, you can kind of pop on a recording of this and listen to it in the background while you're doing something else. But it is important to read poetry aloud to get used to the structure and the style of the language. So the purpose of this lesson is to give you the kind of details of the story, what's going on. So I've written a modern English translation on the right-hand side, and you can see the original on the left-hand side. Don't ever quote from my modern English, always use the left-hand side to quote. So we're going to go through stanzas 1 to 11, and we'll just kind of break it down in chunks so it's more manageable for you. So, fair Isabel, poor simple Isabel. Fair means beautiful, but also honest, good, just. Lorenzo, too, he was a young pilgrim under love's gaze. We start with the predominance of characters. There's no setting, there's nothing going on at this point, just the characters and what they're like. Fair, poor, simple, and pilgrims of love. Love is their religion, love is the thing that keeps them going. Both of them could and would and do die for the sake of love. So we're told that they lived together in the self-same mansion, they live together in the same giant house, but they can't exist together without feeling something. They feel intense emotions. They feel a malady, illness, lovesickness. They can't sit at meals together at dinner without feeling soothed by each other's company. And they definitely can't sleep in the same house but beneath the same roof without dreaming about each other and crying because they can't be together. So there's a lot of details already coming through the text here. They live together, they can't be together, but they want to be, and that causes suffering. They feel happy when they're together and they feel sad when they're apart. So it's got this atmosphere of intense emotion already kind of running through it. So every morning and evening, their love intensifies. It doesn't get better over time, it gets worse. And Lorenzo can't move around the house without seeing Isabella everywhere. It's almost as if the house is just an expression of her. Everything reminds him of her shape. His voice is more beautiful and pleasant to her than even the beautiful noises of nature, like trees or hidden streams. And the music that she sings on her lute, which is kind of an old medieval instrument, a bit like a guitar, kind of echoes his name. When she's singing songs, they kind of tend to be about him. When she does sewing or embroidery, she also accidentally writes his name there too. So they're kind of daydreaming and floating off, and anything they do is just kind of bringing it back around to thinking of each other, like an obsession or a fixation in a way. He knows it's Isabella's gentle hand on the door before she opens it, because he can just tell and feel her presence and her movements. He sees her beauty when she stands in her chamber window, her bedroom. And she prays a lot. She's a good person. She generally does follow the rules of her society, and the love for Lorenzo that she has is the one thing that, is a transgression. So she's praying constantly. She's a good kind of fair maiden archetype. And he watches her as constantly as her prayers. So you might have noticed already there's a few different combinations of the idea of love and spirituality, love and prayer. That's really important in Keats's mind. He actually is quite often depicted as an atheist or a pagan, so he's quite counter to the standard opinion of the church at his time. But he is a very spiritual person, and most of his spirituality he finds in the subject of love. So for him, being in love, or the state of love, is as sublime, as transcendent as being in a religious state. So you'll see a lot of combinations of that as we go through the story. So yeah, he watches because her face is turned to the same skies. They're both watching up to the heavens. And with sick longing, he stays up all night just to hear her first steps in the morning upon the stairs of the house. I really like this one. This is like one of my favourite images. With sick longing, all the night outwear to hear her morning step upon the stair. So he'll last out the whole night just to hear her in the morning. So there's an obsession and a fixation, but there's also a sense that it's supposed to be, and it's opposed to society, so that kind of makes it intense and makes it stressful when it should be beautiful and it should be positive. So they have a difference, a conflict between how they feel on the inside and what society tells them on the outside they should do or how they should be. Because of their status difference and because of Lorenzo's lack of wealth, Isabella would not be allowed to marry him, and yet their souls kind of mirror each other, their behavior mirrors each other. They both love each other purely and honestly and openly. So you've got this conflict between internal and external, between what society says you should do and how people feel like they should be. So they spend the whole of May in this state of sadness. There's a contrasted antithesis of the sad plight, the sad suffering state that they're in, and the fact that it's May, it's the middle of summer, it's meant to be beautiful, full of joy. The seasons are symbolic here, so May and June are times of life and growth and beauty, and their cheeks grow paler, they go sicker because of this secret that they're keeping, that they love each other, and they can't admit that they love each other. There's a lot of speaking into pillows, so you'll notice they do this quite a lot. Lorenzo says to his pillow, the reason they talk to pillows is because they can't admit their love to anyone. They can't confide in a friend or a family member or even each other. It's so forbidden and disallowed because of the status discrepancy. So Lorenzo says, tomorrow I'm going to give in to my feelings. Finally, I'll ask her to start a relationship. And she says, I'd rather die, Lorenzo, than hear you say that you don't love me. But sadly, neither of them do anything, and he just allows the honeyless days and days to continue. Keats is quite obsessed with this idea of honey as a metaphor for how it feels when you're in love. So that's quite a good one to focus on, really. So you can think about the qualities of honey, the fact that it's natural, nourishing, sweet, enjoyable. All of those transfer to the qualities of how love feels. There's a sense that love provides spiritual and psychological nourishment in the way that food provides physical nourishment. The mind and the soul are nurtured by the state of love. So a lot of times when characters are really in love with each other, he'll describe it as honey, and if they're suffering and they can't be in love, like here, it's honeyless, it's not got any honey. The days are not sweet, they're bitter, they're kind of sad, they're empty, even though it's the middle of summer. So then Isabella gets sick. She falls sick within the rose's just domain, meaning the rose kind of has dominion over her. The idea of love symbolized by the rose is a very common old literary trope. Maybe a good one to write down. There's quite a lot of symbolism in the poem. So roses are beautiful and kind of intense and very positive symbols of love, but they also have thorns, and that reminds you of the kind of painful or negative aspects of love as well. So her cheeks stop being rosy and become pale. She's physically sick, but also she's kind of under the spell of the rose. She's under the kind of dominion of the rose. So she falls thin like a young mother who tries really hard to cure her child of sickness. And Lorenzo notices this and he says, she's so sick, I shouldn't tell her, but I need to tell her my love plainly. I will drink her tears, and at least it will stop her from being as worried and stressed. So he feels so strongly for her. He wants to be by her side and comfort her while she's sick. And he doesn't know at this point that she's sick because of him. So he almost plucks up the courage. So he decides one fair morning, his heart is beating awfully, he's got anxiety and stress. He prays for the courage and the power to speak out his love. And he doesn't quite manage. His feelings make him weak and passive like a child. Alas, when passion is both meek and wild. I really like this line, maybe a good one to write down. It means what a shame when passion is very weak, but also kind of crazy and chaotic and wild. So I think that really encapsulates Keats and his own feelings as well. So he woke again once more and anguishes. He gets stressed because of this dreary night of love and misery. Again, antithesis, opposites, extremes that are kind of juxtaposed in the poem. So Isabella has a keen eye. She's sharp as well, and she's obviously fixated on Lorenzo, so she notices that he too is getting sick. And he's waxing, or his forehead is waxing pale. Waxing is a word that we use to describe the moon sometimes, but it also means kind of a transition or a state of change. So it goes pale and dead, and then it goes all flushed with color. So it's kind of, his body is responding very badly to the psychological torment of being in love. Keats trained as a physician, as a doctor, and he's really interested in the physical aspects of the body and how those are connected to the mind and psychology. So love sickness in the medieval era is thought of as a real illness. You could genuinely, at this time, they thought, die of a broken heart. So in the medieval era, we have this sense of love sickness being very, very real illness that people believe in. By the time Keats is writing in the 19th century, we have his interest in psychology and how that affects the body coming through. So both of them get lovesick, but it has a physical effect on them, and they seem sickly and near death. And that actually causes them to finally admit their love for one another. So she whispers tenderly the word Lorenzo, and then she stops and says no more. But in her tone and look, he can read everything because they're so attuned to each other. So just by the tone of voice and the way that she looks when she says his name, he knows that she's in love with him too. And he says, "Oh, Isabella, I can half tell. I can half see that I can actually talk to you about my problems. If you believed anything, believe that I love you and how close my soul is to doom, to dying. I wouldn't want to upset your hand by pressing it unwelcomely, and I wouldn't want to make your eyes scared by staring into them, but I also can't live another day without confessing my love." So it's just got to breaking point where he has to say something. Notice how passive and respectful he is here. He's not forcing his love on her. He's not trying to upset her. He's actually too scared of even admitting anything in case he upsets her. But he does it anyway because he can't bear it anymore. So there's a sense of Lorenzo being a really respectful, sensitive, very kind of, I don't know what the word is, but like he tries really hard to conceal his emotions and control himself, but he feels so intensely that he can't. So it's not that he's impulsive or kind of crazy, it's that he really feels so strongly that it's impossible for him to hold back forever. So either he's going to die from love sickness or he's going to confess his love. So yeah, Keats, I think, is a similar sort of figure, and it's quite different to the typical portrayal of masculinity in this time. So yeah, we can look more into that in future lessons, how Lorenzo is not a typical masculine person of his era. It's quite interesting when you go into it. So she says, "You're leading me away, my love, from the cold of winter." He says, "You're leading me away, my love, from the cold of winter. You're leading me to summer weather." So again, the season's coming in. And I have to taste the blossoms that unfold in its ripe warmth this gracious morning time. It's a metaphor that there's growth and beauty and life born from true love. And from repression of love, it's cold and sick and everything dies. So as he said this, his erewhile timid lips grew bold. They used to be scared and shy, but now his lips are more bold and more poetic, because love allows people to become more poetic and speak more in poetic language, which is, again, something that Keats feels he can do. So they connect with Isabella's in dewy rhyme. There's a connection between Lorenzo's speech and Isabella's speech through rhyme, which always in literature of this time, and also Shakespeare's time, signifies harmony and union. They feel great bliss, total happiness. Great happiness grew like a lusty flower in June's caress. So these things, these feelings of joy, happiness, bliss, they're a bit like flowers that grow out of the state of love. When they separated, it was like they tread upon the air. Twin roses by the Zephyr blown apart. I really like this line. The Zephyr is a gentle west wind. And so they're like roses that perfectly match each other. And as soon as they're not together, it's like they're gently blown apart by the wind. And then when they come back together, they meet again more closely and share the inward fragrance of each other's heart. She sings a fair ditty, a nice little happy song about delicious love and honeyed dart. Again, that word honey, but positive now. And he, with light steps upon a western hill, again the idea of the west wind, says goodbye to the sun. Also the sun sets in the west, and is full of joy. He's happy with the world and the world around him. Everything in the world clicks into place and is perfect because they're perfectly in love and they're in this state of happiness. All close they met again before the dusk had taken from the stars its pleasant veil. He repeats this line. So it's quite an important line, this one. All close they met, all eves before the dusk had taken from the stars its pleasant veil. So there's an idea that nighttime takes the covering off the stars and lets them shine out brightly. Quite nice image. Keats is very interested in the idea of stars. He wrote a poem called Bright Star, which is a really good poem that was to his, well, it was originally for one person he loved, and then people thought that he revised it for another one. So it's kind of about the idea of love in general, but it's whoever Keats is madly in love with at the moment. That's who he writes this poem for. And stars are important because they are to do with fate and destiny. They're to do with the heavens. They're kind of transcendent of earth. They're very spiritual. They provide light in darkness. But there's also a kind of double meaning to them, where, especially in Shakespeare, in Romeo and Juliet, for example, they're called star-crossed lovers. And the idea of being star-crossed means that your fate is sealed and something tragic is going to happen to you. So in a way it's beautiful, but in a way it's foreshadowing the doom or the tragedy that's later to come. So they meet secretly under the stars at night. They're in a bower. A bower is like a kind of a shaded place full of plants where lovers meet. And we get a little bit of a shift in tone here. It would have been better if they'd been like this forever than if lazy ears took pleasure in their sadness. So they get discovered, and we know in the next part of the poem, this beautiful state of happiness that they're in is going to be broken. So yeah, that's the first little section of the story. Hopefully it's all really clear to you. You've got some good notes. We're going to carry on with the next section in a future lesson.